Welcome to episode 10 of the Pops and Drops podcast.
What up, people?
Today, we're going to, as promised in the last episode, talk a little bit about social media. We'll cover the Social Dilemma documentary and how information gets on your phone.
Okie dokie.
All right, should be fun. But first, we'll do a little thought experiment.
All right.
There's something different about you. I'm feeling different now that I found you. There's something different about you. Yeah, I'm feeling different now that I found you.
Okay. So, thought experiment. Okay. Imagine a graph where the vertical axis is household net worth. Okay.
Okay.
At the bottom is 0 and at the top is $200 billion. Vertical axis.
Uh-huh.
On the horizontal axis is number of households in the United States. So it would go from something like 0 to 200 million. Okay. So the line, if you graphed the household net worth of the 200 million households in the United States, what do you think that graph would look like?
Well, what do you mean?
So there would be a tiny distance that you couldn't even see between the graph and the vertical axis because 0 going out to 200 million, there's only one household that has a net worth of over $200 billion.
Yeah.
So that would be close to the vertical axis.
Yeah.
And it would stay almost, right on the vertical axis as it went from one household to 2 to 3 to 4, etc. Until you got down to where it started to widen out. It probably wouldn't even be discernible from the vertical axis till you get to $1 billion. And that might be a tiny little sliver of space between the graph and the vertical axis. And then it would start to widen out. And then, how many households do you think have a total household net worth of $1 million, for instance, right? That's a pretty significant number in the United States because net worth includes the value of your house and all your stocks and all that stuff. So by the time you get to $1 million, there's some distance in the graph. It curves down.
Okay.
And then it starts to go out and around, it's already getting out into the 100 million households out of the 200 million when you get to a net worth of, say, $50,000, right?
Okay.
Net worth is what you own minus what you owe.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the vertical axis, because it's household net worth, would have to actually go below 0 because there's a lot of households that owe more than they own.
There's a lot of, yes.
Okay. So then that you'd see if you got to negative $10,000, negative $20,000, et cetera, that would be when you're cumulatively looking at all of the number of households, that would, that would be the tail.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It might be, I've not done the exercise, but just in theory, that's what it looks like. So, if the graph was cumulative, it would have that sweeping curve. And by the time you got out to, 300 million households, you'd have everybody accounted for that their net assets for the household is above negative $1 million, whatever. I mean, there are probably people out there who owe $1 million over what they own.
Probably, yeah.
At least temporarily. People like Trump, who at one point probably owed $30 million more than he owned.
Yeah.
Anyway, That's sort of an outlier group. But let's imagine that you are at the top of that graph where
Uh-huh.
you're
Bezos.
you're Bezos or someone like him, where your household net worth is over $100 billion. What would you do to stay there?
I wouldn't want to stay there.
Where would you want to be?
I would want to lift up as many people as I possibly could.
Right. But I mean, in terms of your household net worth, where would you want to be?
Where would my ideal household net worth be?
Yeah.
$50 million.
Okay. So your household net worth is $50 million.
Yeah.
So we'll do two things. First, we'll say with you with a household net worth of $50 million, what would you do to stay there, your ideal spot? In terms of your economic and political activity.
I would put most of my money in the bank so that I was just making money off of my money.
Okay.
Just put it into high yield savings accounts or CDs.
Okay. All right. So you wouldn't make any choices about what you bought and where you lived or anything. You would just say, okay, I've got my 50 million and I'm going to, what do you think your annual income would need to be to maintain your lifestyle?
So I mean, what are you asking me?
I'm asking you how you, if you were in this situation,
If I had $50 million,
if your household net worth was $50 million.
yes, what would I be doing? Where would I be?
Yeah.
I would have a townhouse in Chicago. I would have a condo in LA. I would probably have a house somewhere in Texas, and I would probably try to buy an apartment building in Vegas and rent it out.
Okay, so now you're getting into your investments.
Yeah.
Okay, so your 3 residences, that's could be an investment depending on.
I'd probably Airbnb them out.
Okay, that's interesting. Even if you had a net worth of $50 million, you'd still be Airbnb out your condo and your
probably. And I'd probably pay someone to go and check on it and to run that.
property management company.
Probably not a property management company. I'd probably have a friend.
One of
do
your
it.
crew.
Yeah.
Your entourage.
Yeah. Because and I could pay them, and that way they'd have a job, and
Yeah.
probably most of the money that I make from the Airbnb I'd give to the person who'd be watching it, just to make sure that that it was safe and secure.
Okay. So, and then how would you say the rest of your money would just be on deposit and you'd be living off of the interest income from safe investments?
Yeah. I mean, in reality, I'd probably use a big chunk of it to promote my music and for marketing and stuff, buying Facebook ads and that sort of stuff. But
Okay. So your primary source of revenue at that point, you're saying, would be your music that you'd continue to make.
yeah.
Okay. So now let's say instead of you're a $50 million musician,
Uh-huh.
now let's say you're in the stratosphere along with Gates and Bezos and
Okay.
Tim Cook and all those guys that are way up there.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you were in that position and you wanted to maintain your position and your economic power
As a billionaire, as a
as a 100 billionaire,
whatever.
what do you think you'd be doing?
If I wanted to I mean, I don't know why anyone would want to maintain that sort of money, but same thing, just on a grander scale, probably investing in properties and people.
What do you think the risk to you as an individual and to your household net worth is when you're at that level?
The risk of losing what? Losing what? Losing it all? Probably
Losing a significant portion of it.
What is a significant portion of $200 billion? Like if
Half.
okay, that would be fine. Like you'd still have $100 billion.
How would
No
you?
one
Okay.
needs $200 billion. No one needs anything more than like $50 million. So I'm saying that would be like, that's like already uber rich.
Okay, but my question is, if you were in that position
Uh-huh.
and you didn't want to lose 100,
If I was an evil person, you're asking me
Sure.
if I had no
Sure.
morals.
okay, sure. If you're in that position, you have $200 billion of household net worth, and you want to keep it, or you want to be in control of what happens with those resources. What do you think the primary risk to your fortune is?
Everybody.
Okay. So how would everybody get at your money?
I don't know. There's probably on the microsecond level, someone is trying to figure out how to get money out of them. There's probably so many people around the world trying to get money out of them nonstop.
Right, but that's essentially they're presenting decisions to you to make. People bugging you to invest in their ideas.
Uh-huh.
Okay. How do you think they would lose their wealth that was outside of their own decision-making control?
The government stepping in? Is
Okay.
is that the rabbit hole
you
you're
tell
trying
me.
to, or
Is that what you think?
I don't know. Probably.
Okay. So what would the government stepping in look like?
Raising taxes?
Okay. Well, raising taxes
Or closing up the loopholes that allowed
Or closing
them
up the
to
loopholes
get
in
to
the taxes.
$200 billion
right.
in the first place.
Okay. Do you think, but remember, this is not income, this is wealth.
Uh-huh.
So they can, if you're not
Liquid.
earning wages, I mean, there are some forms of taxation on investment, but once you've earned the money, and you've earned it, however you did, you've already been taxed on the income while you were earning it. And now, you're on the backside of the income taxation. So the money that you've earned is in your bank account.
Yeah. But then you're earning money on the money that you've already earned.
Right. But if you're earning money on the money you've already earned, that's not going to remove $100 billion of your 200 wealth. That's just going to slow the growth of your $200 billion. See what I mean? If you're earning income on $200 billion
Yeah.
off of interest
Yeah.
or investments, the interest and the investment revenue can be taxed
Uh-huh.
under the current situation.
Yeah.
But your money that you've already been taxed on as you earned it and put in the bank, that's yours. Under the
Okay.
current tax system, that is not at risk.
Okay.
So how would the government get $100 billion of Jeff Bezos's $200 billion?
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, California is proposing something called a wealth tax,
Uh-huh.
where in addition to taxing your income as you earn it, they're also going to charge you a tax on the money that you've already earned and set aside.
Okay.
So you would be responsible for if you were Jeff Bezos and you had $200 billion and you lived in California, they would say, okay, now every year you're going to be responsible for paying whatever it is, 1% or 2% or 3% of your accumulated wealth to the state in taxes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one mechanism for starting to eat into the accumulated wealth.
Yeah.
Okay. So in order for the state to go through, so let's say that is a mechanism. So understanding you as the 200 billionaire, understanding that is a potential mechanism for getting at the money you've already earned once, been taxed on, and set aside. What kind of political activities might you undertake to protect your assets?
You're posing these questions as though you're asking me what I would do if I was an immoral person.
Okay, well, imagine you're an
I
immoral
don't
person.
know because I'm not an immoral person, and I don't know what kind of snake-like things I would try to attempt if I was a bad person.
Well, if you were trying to protect you, well, let's say you have $50 million. Let's bring the thing down to 50 million.
Yes.
Okay, and now the state is going to say, you've got $50 million. That's
Uh-huh.
more than you need. Every year, you're going to have to pay us 5% of your wealth.
Okay,
So
here you go.
now you just say, okay.
Yes.
At what point do you think it stops being a moral question? $5 million?
$500,000.
Okay, so everybody whose net worth is greater than $500,000,
Uh-huh.
every year the government's going to take some percentage of that away from them.
Okay.
So then what happens?
Then, and if that money doesn't go towards the military industrial complex, then the society actually improves because we use that money to lift up the people who need help
How?
through education, through community college, through programs that get people off the streets, through drug treatment centers, there's a million ways. Social workers, like, that's where that money should be going.
Okay. You know, that has been tried throughout history a few times.
Okay,
It hasn't gone well.
that's fine. It
Why is
doesn't
that
mean
fine?
doesn't mean you don't stop trying to improve society.
Right. Trying to improve society is great. The question is, if you had a historical record of 3 or 4 attempts to do it,
Yeah.
and they all resulted in tens of millions of people being executed, why would you try to do that again? Or unless you hadn't been taught history and you didn't actually know that's what happened. So I'll give you that one. All right. Well, let's go back to our
or before the advent of the internet and everyone can see everything, and there's the whole world's moral compass has shifted, so the kinds of things that happened back then would be prevented. See, that's what you're not taking into account, and that's what your assumptions aren't taking into account.
Okay.
You think that because we want to take care of other people that it's going to result in Nazi Russia or the Communist
having-
Party. It's just absolutely ludicrous for you to make those assumptions without.
Well, here's the problem. When you give the government the power to seize the wealth of its citizens, then people that want to be in control of that wealth do everything they can to get in control of the government. That's the source of the issue. When you take control away from the individual and you make it a collective, then you have people who say, okay, I can see very clearly where this is going. I'm going to get into the government because that's where the power is. And what you end up with is the same thing that has happened every time. You end up with the corrupt, evil people running those governments. And then they end up, jailing and assassinating their political opponents to maintain their power. That's what happens every time.
That's what happened before the advent of the internet.
How's the
Everyone was
internet-
constantly connected and checking each other
But
because everyone is constantly connected and checking each other. And you did not have that. There was not Twitter. There were there wasn't Reddit. There wasn't Anonymous. There wasn't there wasn't any of that sort of stuff.
right.
There wasn't a global economy. We are connected to every other country. We're already connected.
Well, we wouldn't be much of a global economy if the government seized half the wealth of everybody in the country.
That is an extreme example and something that would not
You just took
happen.
it. You just took it down to everybody with a net worth of above $500,000.
I know.
That's essentially everybody in the country who owns a single family home.
You're saying take away half of their income when it's not.
Remember, we're not
anything like
talking
that.
about income anymore. Now we're talking about wealth. We're talking about you said that the wealth tax, where they start taking away people's
a
wealth.
small percentage.
Yeah, but over the course of 10 years, that goes down to zero. I mean, you're going to over time, that system reduces everybody to whatever your threshold for wealth is. You drive everybody down. Now, here's the issue. Unless you close the borders and restrict people from leaving, everybody with real wealth is just gone the minute that starts. So they just take their money and go. Nobody's going to stick around and let the government take $100 billion away from them when it's, they already have houses in the Barbados. They just say, okay, here's my U.S. passport. I'm keeping my $100 billion that you're trying to steal. They all go. Unless you close the borders and say unless you put up a wall and say it's now illegal to leave the United States. That's what happened in East Germany. That's what happened around the Soviet bloc. They had to put up a wall to keep the people inside instead of trying to keep people from getting in.
Okay.
So is that what you're talking about? In order to do this program of yours, put up a wall so that people can't
What
leave?
program? You're the one who's building this thought experiment to try to prove your point that the world is evil and that people are terrible and that everyone would leave because they wouldn't want to help other people. You're the one who's building that world.
I'm not saying the world's evil. I'm saying
Yeah, you are.
I'm saying many people in the world are uneducated and haven't read history and aren't critical thinkers. And they see a problem, and somebody comes along and says, the answer to this problem is take to the streets, throw Molotov cocktails at the police, tear it all down.
It's not what's happening.
Burn it all down.
It's not what's happening.
Okay. So anyway, you've got a box in your pocket, and you're saying that the whole reason that the last 3 or 4 times this has been tried, it's ended up in mass killings of tens of millions of people. You're saying that won't happen this time because people have iPhones and smartphones.
Yes.
Okay. And your mechanism for keeping this from happening is that you can check on each other.
Yes.
Okay. What does that assume?
What do you mean?
What about the technology and the connectivity is your scenario assuming to be true now and constant going forward?
That my generation and the generation below me are not evil sycophants like your generation. We want the world to be a better place. We don't want to destroy each other so that we can get ahead.
What about the technology? Do you have to assume that to maintain your connectivity with the rest of the millennials?
What do you mean? We're already all connected
On
5 million different platforms. Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. Everyone is constantly connected. We're all connected on everything. YouTube, everything. It's not just one platform. It's every platform that's all interconnected. And you get a notification on one and it's sent through all of them. So
right.
something gets posted on Reddit and then it's on Facebook, then it's on Instagram, then it's on Snapchat, then it's on Twitter.
But all of those platforms that you're describing are controlled by under 10 people.
There's a new platform that has sprung up every single day. What are you talking about?
At the point that becomes a critical mass of users, those new platforms they're integrated into the infrastructure of the connectivity.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. That's the point.
So they can
would
be
work.
controlled. You mean you can name off most of the 10, right? Most of the 10 people who control all of the social media.
It's not even people. It's an algorithm. It's not even people anymore. That's what you don't understand.
Algorithms are programmed by people
Yes.
who report to people, who report to other people, who report to other people, who report to other people, who report to one of these 10 people.
Okay.
So who are the 10?
Zuckerberg?
That's one of them. Who else?
I don't know.
Okay, so you're on a platform and you're using it and you're exchanging information and your data is going into this ecosystem where they track who you are, what you do, what you like, how long you're on. This is the social dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jack Dorsey, who's that? You know who Jack Dorsey is?
No.
Okay. This is a great illustration. Okay. So there's less than 10 people who control this whole thing.
Okay.
But you don't know who they are. You just assume that they're benevolent. You just assume that they're not trying to control the narrative.
No, they are trying to control the narrative, and everyone knows they're trying to control the narrative. That's what you don't understand.
Okay, well, through that control of the narrative, remember these 10 people, they're on that vertical axis we talked about.
Uh-huh.
They're the ones at the top.
So what?
So you think that they aren't going to take whatever actions and make whatever decisions are at their disposal to maintain their position up
They
there?
are, and that's what the problem is.
Okay, so you're saying that the problem is the platform that you're relying on to solve the problem. That makes no sense.
What do you mean?
You're saying the reason that this new utopia that you're describing is possible now, when the last 4 times it's been tried, it's ended up in tens of millions of people being killed, is because of this connectivity.
Yeah.
But the people that control the connectivity are the people at the top of that vertical axis.
But they don't control the people.
They control the platform. You just said they control the narrative.
They think they control the narrative. They don't actually control the narrative.
How do they not control the narrative?
Because there's
The fact
no
that you don't-
possible
okay,
way
the
to
fact
control
that
the
you-
narrative.
the fact
there's
that-
no possible. It's like it's a.
Let me jump in here.
You cannot.
You don't know who
cannot,
they are.
You cannot plug all of the holes
The
of
only-
a sinking ship.
The only one you knew was Mark Zuckerberg. You don't know. You didn't mention Sergey Brin. You didn't know Jack Dorsey.
Because I don't care.
Okay. Why don't you think you care? Because you are under the spell.
Of
the
what?
narrative has been controlled. Your perspective and your uncritical use of the platforms
Yeah.
is a result of the narrative.
Okay.
If this discussion was a part of the narrative and people realized that they were out there like puppets running into the street,
Everyone already knows this. That's what you don't understand.
and they continue to run around like puppets
Yes.
uncritically,
Yes.
well, then how do you solve the problem?
What problem?
Chancellor,
What? What? What is its giant problem?
what is the problem?
Yeah, the problem is that there are that the majority of the wealth is isolated to a small group of people. That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
The people that control the narrative and the platforms that you're relying on to say that I'm not controlled by the narrative.
I never said that I wasn't controlled by the narrative,
All right. So if you are controlled by the narrative,
and so are you.
so am I, you're controlled by the narrative.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And the people that control the narrative are the ones that are at the top of that vertical axis.
Yep.
And theoretically, they don't have your perspective. They're trying to either grow or maintain their wealth.
Because they're evil.
Okay. So everybody who controls the platforms that you're relying on as a check against evil are evil.
Yes.
How do you think that works out for you?
What do you mean? You can't destroy a system outside of it. You have to destroy it from the inside.
Well, how are you destroying it from the inside?
There's a million people who are working on these things, on on making sure that the world will become a better place and that people like that will not be in control of the world. But you have to
Well, hold on
control
now.
it from the inside out.
Okay. Make the world a better place.
Yes.
Okay. Better is a subjective term. And for that judgment of, quote, better to be to a consensus to form around that means that conversations are going on. Those conversations are going on the platforms that these guys control to maintain their wealth.
Yeah.
So what you think of as better, they control.
Okay. Oh my God.
Now, let me ask you a question. When you're that wealthy, do you think of it as a job, or do you think you would think of it as a game?
Do I think that Jeff Bezos thinks of the world as a job or a game?
Yeah.
A game.
Mark Zuckerberg,
Yeah, definitely.
Sergey Brin,
Whoever that is, definitely.
the guy who's Alphabet Corp, the holding company for Google and YouTube.
Okay.
All right.
Elon Musk probably thinks of it as a game.
Elon Musk, maybe. I think he's always thought of it as a game, even when he wasn't rich.
Yeah.
Um,
It is a game. The whole thing is a game.
okay.
Life is a game, man.
With real consequences, though. It's not a board game.
Board games can have real consequences. Monopoly has broken up families before.
Okay, but it hasn't usually resulted in somebody pulling out a pistol and shooting someone in the face.
The Old West, that happened all the time.
Right.
With cards.
So do you think we're progressing, or do you think we're regressing?
I think we're progressing, but you think we're regressing. I think in reality we're progressing, but the boomers and the people who are trying to hold on to the conservative ideals think that the world is falling apart. Which your world is falling apart, and the world does have to fall apart in order for it to come together, in order for us to actually progress. Sometimes you need to take one step back in order to take two steps forward.
Oh, okay. So you're in the name of progress, you're justifying shooting people in the face.
No, I never said that.
Well, you said take one step back. We were
That's
talking
not
about
the
the
same as
Old
shooting
West.
people in the face.
Okay. Well, that's what's happening. It's what happened in Denver 2 days ago.
What happened in Denver 2 days ago?
This guy named Dorf, I think his last name is Dorf, was hired by a local news station, ostensibly as a security guard, to go along with their cameraman. He was part of an organization called Submission, SUB.mission, which was affiliated with the Action Network and Antifa. There will probably be a civil case from the family of the victim, who was a Navy veteran, 49-year-old man, killed in front of his 24-year-old son. So this guy, Dorf, I think his name is Dorf, was, again, hired by News 9 Denver to accompany the cameraman to a park where there was a BLM Antifa rally along with a...
White supremacists, Proud Boys.
Support the Blue. It was a
So,
pro-police rally.
Yeah, Proud Boys, white supremacists.
I don't think Proud Boys were part of it, but anyway. Got me distracted. By the way, the head of Proud Boys, the mixed race Latino head of Proud Boys, black and Latino, was on Tim Cook's podcast last week. So if you guys are interested in what the Proud Boys are about, you can go actually see
the white
rather than what the
supremacist group
mainstream-
that marched in Charlotte and has been, the white supremacists. You can just say white supremacists.
They're not.
You don't-
That's
they
the
are.
point.
Yeah, they are.
Remember, you're controlled.
So are you.
That's the
So are
narrative.
you.
I saw the guy.
So are you. So are you.
Have you listened to him?
I will not listen to any Proud Boys propaganda bullshit.
It's not propaganda. All he was doing was talking about the organization, their bylaws. It was just very straightforward.
They are pro misogyny.
It's a men's organization.
Misogyny. They are pro misogyny,
Is the
white
is the
supremacist.
YMCA pro-misogyny white supremacist?
They might be. I don't know, but I know
You
the
don't know
Proud
what the
Boys are.
YMCA is?
The Young Man's Athletic Club or whatever.
Christian Association.
Yeah. Oh, Christian too. They probably are then.
Okay, so the Proud Boys, YMCA, same thing to you. All right. Remember, you're controlled by the narrative.
So are you.
Fine, Chancellor, but there's a person describing the bylaws of an organization. Just
An
because
organization that is founded on misogyny and white supremacy. Continue.
it's not white supremacist, the guy who runs it is a black Mexican.
Yes, that's the thing. I have a black friend, so that doesn't mean I'm racist. That's you assuming that. That is so absolutely ridiculous. And it's clearly that he's clearly a token head of the organization. Like, come on, dude. God,
Proud
like,
Boys.
can you not see below the surface at all? They are white supremacists, misogynists.
According to the mainstream media, which is all you've seen, and you haven't
my
taken the
God.
time to research the organization. You're living within the narrative.
So are you, and you need to accept that. You need to accept that the story that you are fed is to an older white conservative male. That is the algorithms, that is the bullshit that you are fed constantly. So you're living in this world where you're afraid of Antifa, which stands for anti-fascist, by the way. You are living in this world where you think that they are going to burn the country down.
Just because the name of the organization is anti-fascist, which is just a cute name, their actual activities, the actual behaviors that they demonstrate are fascist in nature.
How?
By hitting people over the head who disagree with them.
You mean white supremacists who are marching and who
No,
are killing
little old
people?
ladies crossing the street.
Okay.
Guys walking through downtown Portland making the mistake of wearing a shirt with a flag, American flag on it.
Okay. Sure.
You look up the video.
Okay.
They started beating unaffiliated Portland citizens 2 years ago. There is a video record of what Rose City Antifa has done in Portland over the last 2 years.
Okay.
Watch the videos.
Okay.
You say okay, but you're not going to do it.
Yeah, because I don't believe you. I don't
The
believe
video-
the narrative that
so
you
you
just
don't
like you don't
believe- you
just
don't
like you don't
believe
believe the
me.
narrative.
You don't believe me, but the video evidence is sitting there for you to watch, and you won't even bother to watch it.
Well, what about
It's there for you to watch.
Okay, I'll
Do
watch
some
it.
research.
I'll watch it.
Follow
I'll-
Andy. Follow Andy No, the gay Filipino independent journalist on Twitter, and you'll see the video evidence of what these people are doing every
Okay.
day
Okay.
in the name of whatever Antifa is says they're about. They're out there beating up gay Filipinos.
Okay. Sure.
If
Is
you-
Andy Noah conservative?
he's an independent
Okay,
journalist.
there you go.
What do you mean, there you go? What do you mean, there you go?
It just seems like
So
he's
it's
prob-
justification.
He's probably another token that the right tries to wheel out and say, "Look, we're not anti-gay, anti-black. Here's a gay guy. Here's a black guy." It's so absolutely ridiculous that it's mind-boggling.
Are you gay or Filipino?
No,
Okay. So what you're saying is you understand the motivations of a person
no, I don't.
based
I
on his
never said that.
affiliations. That's the way you're acting.
How?
By saying, oh, he's just a token. He's an Uncle Tom.
I never said that, and I wouldn't use that term.
You've used it before.
Okay,
You have.
sure.
Candace Owens, we were having a conversation about Candace Owens. We've talked about Brandon Tatum, Larry Elder, Thomas Sowell. We've talked about a lot of people. And
Okay.
you've seen people, and the Attorney General from Kentucky, a black Republican congressperson who spoke at the RNC. You've used the term before.
Okay.
All right. Well, I hope you will actually follow Andy No on Twitter and start looking up this of which you say doesn't exist, because there's 2 years worth of video evidence of exactly what Antifa is and what they've been up to.
Okay.
And they have beat people innocent people walking down the streets of downtown Portland in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And the white supremacists have killed people and have murdered people.
Where's you mean in the history of the country? Lynchings back in the
and
early
Charlottesville
1900s?
when they ran over that girl.
Yeah. One person in Charlottesville, 32 people during the Black Lives Matter riots. Okay, so yes, all political violence has no place in this country, but be real clear about where it's coming from. There have been 32 people killed during the Black Lives Matter Antifa riots.
Huh.
That's 32 versus 1. So just keep that in mind. As you move forward and the election comes closer and the mainstream
So
media...
you want to talk about 200,000 people dead, or what is it, 214,000 people dead now because Trump refused to tell everybody to put on masks?
We had that conversation last week. The fact that you think that the coronavirus could kill nobody when evidence from every other country in the world shows that...
New Zealand?
Yeah? You don't think anybody died in New Zealand?
I don't think anybody. I don't know. I know if anybody did, it was incredibly low. It was probably under 100.
Well, how many people live in New Zealand? How many people from China and Europe travel to New Zealand? Yes, New Zealand got off easy because they're not really attached to the rest of the global economy the way that most other countries are.
Okay.
Anyway, you got a box in your pocket, and when you go on Facebook, Instagram, get your little news notifications from Apple News, all of those things are part of an infrastructure that we've already determined are controlled by these people at the top of that vertical axis on our household net worth graph. I mean, the 1, 2, 3, less than 10 people are controlling the platforms that serve you up the narrative that you assume is objective.
I know that it's. I didn't say that I assumed it was objective. Where does that come from? I've been saying this whole time that I know that it's skewed.
Okay. So
what you're refusing to accept is that your viewpoint is
no,
skewed.
I'm not.
You are given a old white man point of view.
Given, oh my God.
I mean, that's what the news that you're fed. Your conservative Ben Shapiro bullshit that you constantly watch and listen to.
So we can go back to I think it was one was media sources. That was episode 2, right? So go back and we started touching on media sources. We're getting into more detail here, but Kyle Kuklinski, Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore. You're saying those are old white men perspectives?
Yes. Jimmy Dore is an old white man.
He's, yes, extremely progressive.
And that
he actually sounds like you. He talks about socialism.
Okay. So
he's not your right-wing conservative that you think I listen to. Tim Pool's not right-wing conservative. He's a skateboarder and punk rocker. I mean, you have this assumption about where I'm getting my information, but you never research.
I know that you don't listen to Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
Okay. Old white.
Ben Shapiro.
Very conservative. Very conservative. Like Christian conservative.
Really, Chancellor?
Which is the worst.
Really? Shapiro?
Religious conservative.
Ben Shapiro is an Orthodox Jew.
Okay. Religious conservative.
Yes, he's religious conservative.
That's the worst kind.
Because
they think that there is a man in the sky that determines everything.
Okay.
And that's where they base their laws off of. Their moral compass.
And what's the opposite of that?
Understanding that human beings are that we need to take care of one another, not because of this outside force, but because of who we are inside. I don't know.
Who are we?
What's the opposite of what? What's the opposite of religion?
Well, if there's a spectrum and you're saying Ben Shapiro, the Orthodox Jew, is religiously motivated in his, political outlook.
Uh-huh.
What's on the other end of that spectrum?
Spiritually,
You think spiritual is on the other end of that spectrum?
yes. I think spiritualism
Where-
and religion are
where-
two completely
Where
opposite.
Where's your Uncle John?
Hell? I don't know.
He doesn't believe in hell.
I know.
So so you've got
I don't even
Orthodox
know.
religion on one end of the spectrum.
Uh-huh.
You've,
And
you're putting
spiritualism on the other.
spiritual on the other
He's
end of the
probably right
spectrum.
in the middle then.
But
Where
right-
where the agnostics are, the people who don't believe in anything.
Well, how do people? So there's people who believe that when you die, that's it. There's no afterlife. There's no consciousness beyond this.
Yeah.
This
And
life.
have no moral compass at all. So they're probably
Well, now there's what's his name?
I know John doesn't have a moral compass.
Well, we
I know
don't-
that he
we don't
truly
even talk
does.
about
I know
your
he
personal relationship.
No, he
with your
truly does
uncle.
not care about any other human beings other than himself. He probably, at his core.
Anyway, that's been demonstrably not true. But anyway, where do you put the people that don't believe that there's a spiritual life after we live this lifetime? On the spectrum where you got spiritual on one end and religious on the other.
In the middle.
How is that in the middle?
What do you mean?
You think religion, where they believe that there is an afterlife and there is a force beyond this life, that it's got some higher level of
There are people that only do things because they're afraid.
Okay.
They're afraid of what will happen. They're afraid that they will go to hell if they eat cows, or if they eat things on Friday or whatever, and that women shouldn't have the right to vote, or
Sharia law.
shouldn't have the right. Yeah. They do that out of fear.
Okay.
All of that is based out of fear.
Or
And
out of
that's the religious to the right.
I don't know that
It's out of fear. It's out of fear.
people that observe Sharia law only do it out of fear.
Probably. I think most organized religions are based in fear, because that's why religions were created in the first place, was to control the mass public through fear, saying that you have to do this because if you don't, you're going to hell.
Although there's some religions that say there is a path to heaven, so it's not necessarily fear of going to hell. Maybe it's working towards some vision of what's. It's a subtle difference, but there are people that rather than feeling constrained not to do things by this fear of going to hell, there's people that believe the only way to go to the next level, or progress through the Hindu idea of progressing.
Yeah, and that's spiritual. That's on the opposite end. Those are people that is
Hindu is
based
an
in love,
organized-
not based in fear. That's what I'm saying.
But that's an organized religion.
But it's not one that is based in fear.
Okay,
So it's
now
on the
you've
spiritual
got,
side.
So now you've got one kind of religion that you said is fear-based on one end of the
Yes.
spectrum, another kind of religion, organized religion,
Yes.
on the other end of the spectrum.
That's love and fear, and the people who do not have a moral compass and who do not do things out of either being afraid or because they want to pursue love are right in the middle, like John, because he can't experience actual emotions.
Okay. That's an interesting definition of a spectrum.
Love on one end and fear on the other. That's everything. That's life. That's every motivation. Good or bad.
Okay.
Light and dark. Love and fear. There's only two things.
Okay.
That's how I view my world. Is
Okay.
through that lens.
All right. So, what are you afraid of?
I like in general, or
You said this is how you view your life. So I'm just curious, what are some examples of each end of that spectrum?
I'm afraid that the world will end due to man's stupidity.
What does that have to do with? So that's your fear of You're talking about climate change?
That's one factor.
Oh, what's another example?
Pandemic because people are dumb. War because people are dumb. Like those are the things that I'm afraid of.
Okay. How does people being dumb cause a war?
Every war is caused because people are dumb.
How? By allowing their governments to get them into wars?
What do you mean?
I'm asking you how people being dumb. I mean, the people that start wars start them for a reason. Usually it's
Because
economic
they're
in
dumb.
nature. I wouldn't call the people that start wars dumb. You don't usually get into a position where you can start a war by being dumb.
At the root, if you are trying to inflict violence on other people and war is anti-love.
Yes.
So then it's based in fear.
Right.
Fear, you're only afraid of things that you don't understand. So that's why.
What was Hitler afraid of when he started invading the countries around him?
What was Hitler afraid of?
Yeah.
That people would know who he was inside? I don't know what Hitler's greatest fear was, but he did everything because he had some sort of fucking complex.
That's probably true.
Because he got rejected from art school. Because he was afraid of
But he was conniving and he was smart enough and conniving enough to get himself into that position.
He was one of the dumbest people on the planet.
Well, what do you define by dumb? You mean misguided?
That's a part of it, yeah.
Okay.
He either killed himself in a bunker or he lived out the rest of his life in Argentina.
Well, we're talking about how he got into a position where he had the political power to take Germany into World War II. He wasn't just some dumb guy on the street. He gained control of an entire country.
Yes.
Dumb people don't typically do that.
Trump did, and so does Hitler. Like your definition of dumb is not the same as my definition of dumb.
Exactly. Yeah. So
you're idolizing idiocracy.
No, I'm not idolizing anyone. My definition of dumb is of incapacity, incapable. I mean, the technical definition of dumb is you unable to speak. That's what the word technically means, right?
Okay.
Deaf, dumb, and blind. Dumb, you can't speak. Trump speaks way too much. He's definitely not technically dumb. He has plenty to say.
He doesn't understand. Neither did Hitler. What life is about. He's the ultimate dumb person.
Okay, so misguided. What's a more specific word to use so that it's less confusing?
Afraid.
Okay, but okay. Afraid of, well, we're getting into discussions of the roots of narcissism, I guess. I mean, clearly everybody who gets themselves into that position is a big narcissist.
Yeah. Hitler and Trump are both giant narcissists.
And Clinton and Obama and everybody who gets into that position. You don't get to that level without being a narcissist. Unless you're George H.W. Bush. You get there just because you think you inherited it.
Again, you want to talk about dumb? I mean, fool me once, shame on you. You can't fool me again.
So we've agreed that the information that's served up to you on this box is controlled. It's a controlled narrative, but somehow you still think that's the solution to the problem.
Yeah, You can't. What do you mean? Of course. Everyone knowing everything.
But you don't know everything. It's a controlled narrative. We just talked about the
It
fact
can't be controlled if everyone. It cannot fully be controlled. It can be skewed, sure. People can edit footage. But if it's live and it's happening and like you can't edit that stuff.
right, you can, but uh, I guess the issue is if you think less in terms of an individual, but a community or a system,
Uh-huh.
the algorithm determines which live videos get promoted so that more people see them.
Yes.
Okay. And again, you don't necessarily control the narrative. Oh, increasingly, it is controlled at the individual user level, but in general, if you look at it at a community or society level, these forces that are inside the algorithm are controlling the narrative for the entire society or community. Now, the algorithms and the motivations and the signal in these models is based on commercial motivations. It's not at this point societal or political motivation.
No, it's all about selling.
It's
everything.
commercial.
Yeah.
It's about maintaining attention.
Yes.
So the AI, if you want to call it that, or the algorithms, they're not benevolent or malevolent. They're, at least they weren't initially. They're designed to keep people's attention longer and longer and longer. But what happens is that at some point, probably before the 2016 election, but definitely after the 2016 election, the engineers at the social media platforms, and this was documented by Project Veritas with the whistleblowers who came out and said, we are doing this. They said the algorithms ran wild, too much influence. We discovered through the process of Twitter bots and all kinds of different things that the conversation could be manipulated using the algorithms as an infrastructure. And so they started taking steps to control the algorithm in a not purely commercial way.
Yeah, and that's what they're doing right now.
Right. And so the people, again, the people that control those platforms up there at the top, who are trying to maintain their wealth and power, are controlling those algorithms.
To a certain extent.
Okay.
They're controlling what they can control.
Right.
They can't control everything.
Well, you can't, but you can control enough so that you only could name Mark Zuckerberg as one of those people and that you had never heard of Andy Ngo.
Because I don't care.
And the reason you don't care is because the other stories they feed you don't give you any signal that would indicate, oh, maybe I should be concerned about this. Maybe I'll just watch music videos all day. Maybe I won't have any videos from the news pop up in my feed that says, the city of Portland's been burning for 137 days. You just never see it.
I see my actual friends who are down there and marching and who are getting tear gassed and who the cops are shouting at. And I go down there and I march and I could see the hatred in the cops' eyes as I was down there. I'm living in the world. That's the difference.
Okay. Let's not give anybody the idea that you've been down there 137 times.
No, but I did go down there.
Once. Right?
Yes.
Okay, one time. I just, when the historical record comes back, we don't want people mistaking you for one of the people that was throwing Molotov cocktails at police officers.
That was that's the 90 they had a massive, just so people understand, they did a massive a look at this, at all of the marches, and 98% was peaceful. Like 98% of the marches and the people were peaceful. 98%. So you're talking about 2% of the people in these marches were violent versus the police that are overwhelmingly violent.
The police's job is to be violent.
Exactly.
The role of government is to monopolize violence. Regular citizens are not supposed to have to be violent with each other. That's the job of the police and the army. The military is supposed to monopolize the violence against external threat, and the law enforcement is supposed to monopolize violence against internal threats.
But
that's their job.
That they create the threats.
When criminals pull out guns and knives and attack each other, that is a threat. That's what the police are for, to keep people who would do that from doing it to other people inside the country. That's their role. That's what monopolizing violence means.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we've covered some pretty good territory and demonstrated the results of the different algorithms and the different ways that narratives are controlled, and given our audience some things to think about.
Okay.
Just to remind people the premise of this podcast, this is a boomer economist, social scientist, master's in political science and business, and a millennial art school graduate, former actor, current electronic dance music producer. Right.
Former real estate agent, worked in.
Yes, but so we
worked at tech startups.
Yeah, definitely. There's not a whole lot of actors who haven't also done something else, right? It's kind of hard to make a living just doing acting until you get to a certain level. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the premise of the podcast. And you might think that an EDM producer and, a millennial EDM producer and a boomer economist would never encounter each other and take the time to have in-depth conversations about anything. They would just blow each other off and say, he's, whatever. But we're forced into a particular situation because we live on a compound together.
Yeah, okay. Let's go with that.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a compound.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a mountaintop, 82-acre former timber farm, and we don't really go down the mountain all that often, thanks to COVID.
Yep.
So, and we also, if this is your first episode tuning in, we typically feature one of Chancellor's songs at the conclusion of each. Also, the music that's at the beginning of the podcast is one of Chancellor's songs as well. So today we have, you want to intro the song we're going to use today? Trendsetter?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so here is Trendsetter. When I was making this song, I was kind of thinking of a fashion show and a catwalk. So that's this is very housey and because I'm a trendsetter, yo.
All right, we hope you enjoy. Look up Chance the Closer on Google and find all the different platforms where his music is. And
I'm everywhere.
Check them out.
Yep. Adios.
Chance Closer. trendsetter, bitch.